Today is a pretty special day in the history of rock and roll. Today is September 7th, 2021. It's 18 years since one of the most eccentric, perhaps underrated, definitely biggest cult figures in rock and roll left us. Talking about Warren Zevon. Warren's music has had a huge impact on my life. He's played a huge part for so many years. I think, like a lot of people who are into him, I started listening to him and I was attracted to the music because it's different. You know, he hung out in the singer-songwriter circle in the 70s in LA, but he was not this sort of gentle, Eagles, peaceful, easy feeling, Linda Ronstadt type stuff. He had this very sinister, delightfully wicked feeling. He wrote about, gangsters and death and murder, and but yet he wrote some incredibly beautiful love songs too, and he wrote some very funny, hilarious songs, and a lot of critiques about pop culture and people around him. So anyway, I'm doing this video in the middle of what I jokingly started to refer as, and now it's stuck, my Zevonathon. I did this last year, and it was Labor Day. Today's the day after Labor Day, and so I actually used it, one, as an excuse to get a 4-day weekend from work, and two, it's been all Zevon all day today, which is really fun. I'll read to you what I got, what I've listened to so far after I do the album rankings. So I know so many of these albums like the back of my hand, but one thing today allows me to do is sort of, to paraphrase one of his great songs, reconsider me. I'm able to reconsider some of these albums because some I just don't listen to that much. Some I didn't like a whole lot to begin with, and they've grown on me, and a couple of sort of vice versa. And so what I do with my Zevonathon is I sort of start with the lesser known stuff or the albums I don't play a whole lot, because that, when you start first thing in the morning, I'm actually on coffee number 7 right now. When you start first thing in the morning and you're waking up and you're attentive, it allows to sort of take in, to digest the lyrics and the music that you're not as familiar with, and listen with a more open set of ears. And by the end of the day, you want sort of what's comfortable, the hits. I mean, he didn't really have hits, but to those of us who are sort of in the cult of Zevon, who, he's another one. I've got all of his albums, plus some. It allows you to take in what you don't know as well. And so that's a cool thing when you do a marathon. There's no way to hit all of it in one day. I guess I could, but realistically you just can't. So anyway, this first one, I forget how many there are. I actually didn't count. But I feel bad about listing this one as last. Came out in 2002. Warren labored for 5, 6, 7 years on the lyrics and the music to this, and he was very proud of it, and he was on a little independent label, and they tried to give it a push. It's one thing about Zevon is he was really could be his own worst enemy. He sabotaged his own career a number of times, whether on purpose or accidentally, or a mixture of both. He was such a complex individual. There's a great article out there about dealing with his sort of complicated legacy. To me, it's not that complicated. He was really no worse than a lot of his contemporaries. Anywho, starting us off at the very bottom, and again, I feel bad, but it's an album from 2002 called Life Will Kill Ya, and there are a couple of good songs on here, but this is one, no matter how many times I've tried listening to, it just doesn't resonate with me. Really good opening song called I Was in the House When the House Burned Down, and right then and there, that'll give you, the title gives away his kind of sense of humor for those who are unfamiliar. Again, he was sort of L.A. Noir would be a good term for his music. He was not your typical singer-songwriter. Um, yeah, there's Fistful of Rain is a really good one, kind of sentimental. This one also sort of darkly foreshadowed what was going to go on. There's a song on here that was supposed to be imaginary, and a couple years later it came true. It's about a character who goes to a doctor and finds out it's not good news. And I don't normally curse on this channel, but and they actually didn't even print it out here. It was track number 9. They didn't print it on the back. Artemis Records didn't. It's called My Shit's Fucked Up. And you know, I went to the doctor. I was feeling kind of rough. He said, "Let me break it to you, son. Your shit's fucked up." And it goes downhill from there. Kinky Friedman, of all people, the great Texas Jewish cowboy, self-proclaimed Texas Jew boy, does a good cover of that. But beyond those songs, I'm just not big into Life Will Kill You, and I feel bad. It's recently been remastered, and it's kind of as many of his latter day albums where he was playing these, you know, middle America dumps, you know, dinner theaters and stuff. But you know, after his brief stint of ironic coolness in the late 70s and early 80s. So it came out then. Next up, going down the list, is he was on Asylum Records for the better part of the late 70s and early 80s, and this is the last studio album he put out. Zevon, for those unfamiliar, was a complete addict for many, many, many years. Alcohol, drugs, if there was a drug out there, he did it. And it really got the better of him. It got the better of his writing, and each album kept coming in less and less. And so there's this one, the last one he did for Asylum in 1982, I want to say, right? And I listened to this whole thing today just to try and give it another chance. The title track is a really cool one. It's about spies and, you know, all the clandestine stuff that goes on. The Overdraft is a good one. That ain't that pretty at all. Never Too Late for Love, but overall, it's just, it lacks. It sounds forced. His longtime musical collaborator and guitar extraordinaire Waddy Wachtel helped produce this and played, but it just, I hate to say it, I see why Asylum dropped him after this. It just, not a whole lot going for it. I listened to it. It's not as bad as I remember. It's one of those cases, but boy, just not a lot there. This one, Warren actually hated. A lot of people think the self-titled album in the mid-70s was his debut. It was not. He put out a very poorly marketed, received, perhaps even put together album in 1969 called Wanted Dead or Alive. Warren, when this was reissued in the late 70s after his popularity, he disowned this. But I gotta say, you know, it's not the bottom of my list because there are traces of what was to come. It's a very scatterbrained record. There's not a lot of consistency. The title track is really good. It does a really so cheesy, it's great cover of Iko Iko, the old New Orleans standard. Thule's Blues is on here, which was written for his first wife. Gorilla, Fiery Emblems. Certainly not essential listening. Definitely more for the diehards. But the embers are there. The snippets are there of what was to come. So, not the bottom of the list, even though it was for Warren himself. Wanted Dead or Alive, the actual debut from 1969. Next up, this was the next to last studio record on Asylum. It's not a bad album. Got some really good songs on it. It's called Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School. It's from 1980. Well, it's actually, I guess, Elektra Records. Even Asylum, you know, was part of Elektra. Title track's okay. Jungle Work is another Mercenary song. Jeannie Needs a Shooter is pretty good. Gorilla, You're a Desperado is a great song. A Certain Girl, I want to say that was an Ernie K-Do song, the old New Orleans disc jockey, but it's an old R&B song. Play it all night long. Just this really satirical look at Southern living. I'm not going to recite the lyrics here. I've already cursed enough. Um, but it's an interesting album. This one is, again, it's no stinker. It's not great. It's in the bottom half, but again, more for diehards. But I would not make this the last album you buy either. It's fairly decent, fairly solid. I haven't listened to this one yet today, but I remember from last year. I thought, oh, that's a lot better than I remembered it. So that's always a pleasant surprise. This one used to rank a little higher for me. It's gone down, I think, because others have gone up. You know what I mean? It's not because this is a bad album. It's a solid album. It's from 1990. He was on Giant Records, 1991, called Mr. Bad Example. And it takes every cliche plus some of, you think, oh, what's the worst a person could do? And in a very comedic way, the title track strings it together. I remember a guy I used to work with, a maintenance supervisor, said, oh, this is a polka song. It's not a polka song. It's interesting. Finishing touches is a sort of mid-tempo bruiser. Susie Lightning is kind of a sentimental song. Mr. Bad Example I talked about. Renegade is a look at the southern side of things, not the racist bad side of Reconstruction, but the South, taking a look at it almost from the loser's point of view, leftover hard feelings from, if you're from the South, the war between the states, otherwise the American Civil War, and wondering why they're still being punished all these years later and being treated poorly by Northerners. And there's something to that. There's a definite disdain from a lot of Northerners for Southerners in general, a lot of stereotypes. Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. This is a sort of autobiographical. He used to go up with Waddy Wachtel to Denver up in Colorado and sit in the Rattlesnake Cafe and hope Hunter S. Thompson showed up, the great writer extraordinaire, gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. So anyway, Mr. Bad Example. Here's another one. Middle of the pack. Solid album. Not great. Not terrible. Not your first choice to start, but definitely one to pick up when you're getting into Zevon's music. This one might be a little controversial because this is the only one he ever got, or he ever released, that earned a Grammy, and it was his second and final gold record, and it was his last one, called The Wind. And when he found out he was diagnosed with incurable lung cancer, and I could spell the type, it was the kind that attached itself to the membranes of your lungs, and just a horrible thing. He was given 3 months to live. He ended up living 13 months. The first thing he did when he made it public is he called up his publicist and said, you can use my terminal diagnosis to further my career in any way possible. Warren always had a darkly comedic look at things and pragmatic way of looking at things. So again, it's a really good, solid album. There are a lot of key players on here from the classic rock scene. Don Henley's on here. Bruce Springsteen does a great guitar solo on the second song called Disorder in the House. Obviously very introspective. He went out to make the album of a lifetime. Did he achieve it? As best he could for the position he was in and for as many years as he'd been doing it. Yeah, it's a really good album. First song, Dirty Life and Times, completely autobiographical. A very maudlin, heart-wrenching version of Knocking on Heaven's Door by Dylan. She's Too Good for Me. Warren was a hopeless romantic and a hopeless womanizer. He could never settle down. He was never that good to the women in his life. But he also came from a background where women were not valued. And his own mother had disowned him for a long time and abandoned him. So a very complicated upbringing. But yet, some of the girls he dated many times, they kept coming back. They were always better friends than they were lovers. So he was he was not a good mate, but he was a good friend. And so anyway, Rub Me Raw is interesting. Prison Grove. The last song you'll know, it's been in every, sort of dramedy, sitcom for the sentimental moments, Keep Me in Your Heart. I will admit I like it a lot. Some people sort of mock it. I think it's great. So we're getting toward the top of the pack here, sort of the bottom end of the top of the pack. Next, this is an album that got slammed when it came out. It, for years, sort of languished. It did not get a proper remaster. I don't even know if there's a vinyl copy available. Music on Vinyl put this out on Music on CD just last year, and I finally was able to get a copy at a reasonable price. Excuse me. Italian Roast going on from World Market. So that's the beverage right now. But this one I instantly liked. It's sort of art rock, sort of dad rock. Nothing bombastic, which is unusual. Maybe that's why it got panned. Some people said it lacked emotion. I don't think so. Mutineer from 1995. God, there's something about this album, and it's strange. That's for sure. There are a lot of keys and percussion, and I think he played most of the instruments himself. Seminole Bingo. This one's really strange. Something bad happened to a clown. Got sort of off-key circus music in the back. Similar to Rain is very sentimental. The Indifference of Heaven is brilliant. Poisonous Lookalike, talking about your lover not being who you think they are. Piano Fighter is really good. Rottweiler Blues. I played this one earlier, and I made a note. the line stuck out. Don't knock on my door if you don't know my Rottweiler's name. It's this. I shouldn't laugh. I don't know if it's meant to be funny or not, but it is to me. Monkey Wash, Donkey Rinse, and Mutineer. So maybe more for diehards. But I really like this album a lot. Really good album. Now we're sort of getting into the creme de la creme here. Here's one that a few years ago was at the bottom of my list. When I bought it, I went, I can't get past the production. Can't get past who's on it. He used REM as his backing band. This one was made after he'd burned a lot of bridges in the record industry, and he was trying to make a comeback, and it was a semi-hit. Sentimental Hygiene. He plays a lot of guitar on this one, but there's a lot of piano too. But boy, this is the more I started with this today. There's a song on here called Trouble Waiting to Happen. So I actually spun that song first. That was the first song I listened to of the day, which is on side one. And then I went back and started with the title track. Boom Boom Mancini is about a fighter of that name. And the name of the game is Be Hit and Hit Back. And that was almost kind of his philosophy in life, too. The Factory is an interesting working man song. Trouble Waiting to Happen. I woke up this morning and fell out of bed. Trouble waiting to happen. I should have quit while I was ahead. Trouble waiting to happen. But it's got this very upbeat melody and guitar line. Just an odd sing-along song, and it should be. That's so much of Zevon is odd, but I love it. A song about sort of backstabbers and liars called Even a Dog Can Shake Hands. All these people trying to woo me and impress me, but even a dog can shake hands. Last song on beautiful love song on here, sad story behind it, and I'll suggest you look that story up yourself, called Reconsider Me. But the last song, called Leave My Monkey Alone, produced by George Clinton, sounds like a Parliament song, has Flea from the Chili Peppers on bass. It shouldn't work for a Zevon song, but yet, like so much else with his work, it just does. And man, I spun this today. I love this album. One that you might not have even heard of, played this earlier too, 1989, so it's the follow-up to that one. It's a sci-fi based album, really, called Transverse City. And it's very electronic, almost robotic. Transverse City, Run Straight Down, Turbulence. Perestroika's on here. There's a song called Networking, which basically predicts Facebook 10 or 15 years before it ever happened. Gridlock on here. The urbanization of America and the world. The subject matter is kind of all over, but it's all a cohesive unit. And this is one I don't think, again, it wasn't huge, it wasn't put down, but I love this album. Transverse City. Definitely worth checking out. So now we're into the top 3. And for a lot of people, this is number 1. And if this is your number 1, I could not argue it. Is an original pressing of Excitable Boy. This is the album that broke him into the big time. He was only there for a few years. Again, habits got the better out of him. There's an infamous concert where he opened for the Grateful Dead that did not go over well. Johnny Strikes Up the Band, Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner, which was written with a former Irish, not bounty hunter, mercenary, while he was living in Spain. Excitable Boy. Boy, the lyrics on that one are strange. Again, they're upbeat, but they are funny and dark. This is where Werewolves of London comes from. It's a fun ditty, but I think anybody who's a Zevon fan is just tired of that song, except for when we want to listen to it. Beautiful love song, Accidentally Like a Martyr. Obligatory funk song called Nighttime in the Switching Yard. Vera Cruz, which is about the Mexican Civil War. Tenderness on the Block. And then the great Lawyers, Guns, and Money closes this out. This is definitely a great starting point. I think this was my starting point for Zevon. I have the CD. It has a couple of bonus tracks on it, but I thought I'll share the OG vinyl pressing of this from '78. It was originally a lot shorter, and when I had a had a listening party, Waddy grabbed Warren and a couple of the other key players, and he said, "You, me, now," and they went, and he said, "This is an unfinished album." It was less than 30 minutes long. So thank goodness Waddy stepped in, as he did so many times, to help Warren. This one I have, again, I've got the CD. I had the CD for a long time, and then got the vinyl repressing on Ship to Shore Records. This album, it was kind of put down by critics, but again, Warren was not in critical favor at the time in 2001 when this came out. This is actually the follow-up to Life Will Kill You, which to me, you could not have two more different records. He wrote with everybody from sports writer Mitch Albom to Hunter S. Thompson on here. Won't even go through all that. Carl Hassan, the novelist, or Hassan. It's an album called My Rides Here. This is, again, the last one he did before The Wind, before his terminal diagnosis. So the album titles Life Will Kill You and My Rides Here were almost foreshadowing. It's pretty crazy. Sacrificial Lambs is sort of this grungy, fast-paced number. Does a lot of name-checking in a humorous way. Smokey and the Bandit and Saddam Hussein were out one night acting crazy, and they got insane. Something, I can't remember the exact phrase. Basket Case. Lord Byron's Luggage is a great song, about mortality and getting older. McGillicuddy's Reeks is an Irish song. You're a whole different person when you're scared. That's the one he did with Hunter Thompson. Hit Somebody, the hockey song, was with Mitch Albom. And David Letterman does a guest vocal on there. Listen to it, you'll find it. Genius. Laissez-moi tranquille, which Warren's French was not that good, and I took French in high school, and mine's not that good either. I Have to Leave, and then the title track, My Rides Here. My Rides Here is easily in my top 5 songs. Any playlist I make with Zevon, it's always toward the end because it's just this epic. I get goosebumps every time I listen to it. So, number 2, My Rides Here. Number 1, that means can only be the self-titled album, 1976. He had 7 years to put this together. This is an original pressing. Still, unfortunately, they put the price sticker right on it, but that's okay. I found this a couple years ago. You'll listen to who's all on here. Phil Everly, who Zevon was actually the musical director for the Everly Brothers for quite a few years. Waddy Wachtel, Jackson Brown, J.D. Souther, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, who was Stephanie Nicks on here. Oh gosh, who else? Bobby Keys, the great saxophone player from the Rolling Stones and from Lubbock, Texas. Glenn Frey and Don Henley are on here. I know I should be. Bonnie Raitt, Rosemary Butler, more Bobby Keys. Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys is on here. I mean, here's a master class in songwriting. Frank and Jesse James, Mama Couldn't Be Persuaded, Backs Looking Down the Path, Hasten Down the Wind, Poor Poor Pitiful Me, which you know from a bunch of covers, The French Inhaler, Mohammed's Radio, I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, Carmelita, Join Me in L.A., Desperados, Under the Eaves. This is everything great about songwriting from LA in the 70s. It's sort of the seedy, dark underbelly. Again, Zevon had years to put this together. So here's another one. This was actually a lot lower, quite a bit lower in my estimation for years, because I only had the CD, and it was one of those 80s CDs where the transfer was terrible, just horrible, from analog to digital. And then I took a chance. I found an original copy, and the more I've listened to it, the more it's gained in my esteem. I can't say anymore. It's just it's the best Zevon album there was. Then here's a couple of studio albums I didn't add in here because this one was posthumous. It's called let me get the full title right. Preludes, Rare and Unreleased Recordings. A lot of it was found in a storage locker by his son Jordan. A couple other songs in here, mostly from the late 70s. Really good songs, some demos. Not essential listening unless you're more of a diehard, but really, really good. There's also an interview on here. Jody Denberg at the great Austin DJ performed the interview, wrote the liner notes for this. Fun song, fun album, Hindu Love Gods. And you're going, okay. This was also done with REM, was released a couple years after it was recorded, but it's all covers. And it's the old blues song, Walkin' Blues, Travelin' Riverside Blues. Sort of a moderate hit on here, Raspberry Beret. They covered the Prince song, Albert King, Crosscut Saw, Junko Partner, the old New Orleans classic, Manish Boy, Wang Dang Doodle, Battleship Chains, I'm a One-Woman Man, and Vigilante Man. It's just fun. It's kind of hard to get, at least at a reasonable price. I don't think it's ever been officially remastered and re-released. But it's fun to have. And then there are 2 official live albums. This one was done on one of those many aforementioned very small dive dumpy clubs, but yet his performances were great, but he was playing 12-string guitar and playing piano by himself. It's called Learning to Flinch. It's a surprisingly inspired and solid live effort. And it covers his recordings up until that point in 1994. And actually, why can't I... The Indifference of Heaven, he recorded and released it here live before he did on studio. Might even be a better version. A lot of people think so. So again, interesting. Warrior King is a slide guitar blues that he did that I don't know was on any other album. And if it was, I can't remember which one because there are so darn many. So Learning to Flinch, good live album. Now, I've spoken of my absolute love of Jay Giles' Full House. This album is one of its rivals for my favorite. Here's an original pressing of Stand in the Fire that for many, many years was out of print, recorded live at the Roxy over several nights, 1980, sorry. it came out on the heels of Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School. Zevon was on fire. The band was on fire. It's from a small tour he did called The Dog Ate the Part We Didn't Like. Just typical Zevon. So Stand in the Fire, Jeannie Needs a Shooter, Excitable Boy, Muhammad's Radio, Werewolves of London, Lawyers, Guns and Money, The Sin, Poor Poor Pitiful Me, I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, and then a medley of Bo Diddley's A Gunslinger / Bo Diddley, the old R&B song. So here's an original pressing. Then, of course, I've got the CD remaster that had several bonus tracks that were not available at the time. And then just this year, Run Out Groove Records put out a 2 LP set with the original, and then a whole second album consisting of these outtakes, which there were 3 of them, 4, and then 6 others that had never been heard at all. Rumor always had it that Warren picked the songs for the original album and destroyed the tapes, and he didn't want anybody else to ever hear them. Well, this proves that not only was the tape for the first, or whatever night the first one was recorded, not lost, there's an alternate take on The Sin on here, and then several solo piano pieces, several bands. Finally got a proper live release of Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, which for whatever reason, it had never been made available. If you can get an original, find it, pick it up. The CD is great, sounds fantastic, but to get all this and yeah, this is more of a collector's thing, but to get this, just one of the most fiery, incendiary, fantastic live albums in rock and roll. Find yourself a copy of Stand in the Fire. So, boy, this is a long video, and I'm sorry, and if it takes you a while to watch it, and you have to watch it in segments like I do with longer videos, I completely understand. So, here's to Zevon. I'm going to continue my Zevonathon all through the evening. I'm not sure where it's going to go. Like I say, I started with Sentimental Hygiene Side 1, and then I listened to the second album of the alternate takes and unreleased tracks from Stand in the Fire. Mutineer I listened to, then Transverse City, then the Envoy. Oh, Envoy, really quick. It's neat to watch or to look at the copy I've got, because I bought this at a cool record store up in Muskegon called Third Coast Vinyl, and it's a library copy, and you can see it's written withdrawn, and there's the catalog number, and the sticker fell off, but it's in here from the Loudoun District Library, which is our local library in Grand Haven. So I actually got, when they purged, years and years ago and switched from vinyl to CDs, ended up in somebody's hand. They sold it. I picked it up at a local record store, which, how cool is that? So anyway, thank you so much for your kind attention and all the encouragement, and people have been leaving more comments, and I love that. I love discussing it, and I'm sorry I'm behind on the responses to the comments. I will get to them. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great day.